Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Welcome to the podcast, concerts that made us, interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down. The greatest live shows and the cheering crowd sound. It's concerts that made us, concertsthatmadeus.com.
Hey, this is Ashton Nyte, and you're watching Concerts That Made Us.
Along the edges of this life, 1,000 voices singing in denial. Books are burning as the beat goes on. Reflection of desire, smothering the splinters of the sun. Mirror, mirror, blurring the lines across the waves and echoes of time. Mirror, mirror, darker than goodbye. Behind the borders of the truth, 1,000 choices for eternal youth. Domination of the weak, miseducation of the poor. Tyrants hold their breath while the people drown in the cure. Mirror, mirror, blurring the lines across the waves and echoes of time. Mirror, mirror, darker than goodbye. Mirror, 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 midnight. Mirror, 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 midnight. Mirror, mirror, blurring the lines across the waves and echoes of time. Mirror, mirror, darker than goodbye. Mirror, 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 midnight. Mirror, 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 midnight. Mirror, 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 midnight.
Ashton Nyte, you're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's fantastic now. I'm super excited to dive into your music over the next bit. On the 18th of October, The Awakening are releasing the self-titled 12th album. Take us a bit deeper into it if you can.
Well, I started making music when I was 3, which would explain how there's 12 albums out, right? Well, not really, but yeah, we started in the late 90s. It's been a wild ride. This is for a while there, we were putting out an album every year, and I started releasing solo albums back in 2000. So it was one of each, sometimes coming out in the same year, and lots of touring and all of that. And the last few years, I've been focused more on the solo work, and I've been writing a few books and focused more on sort of acoustic orientated kind of singer-songwriter world, and which is absolutely wonderful. And then I found myself I would say nearly a year ago, I was just going through some of my old records and actually just fell in love again with many of the bands and songs that got me to create this sort of art in the first place. And I thought I'd make a little EP, and of course one thing led to another, and now there's an album. And it's very much I guess, I wouldn't say full circle, but it's kind of paying homage to the artists that got me to do this in the first place, and kind of celebrating everything I've got to experience as the Awakening, and all the music we've put out and all the tours we've done and all of that. I try to kind of capture all that in one album. So that's where we are now.
You almost make it sound like a bit of a bookend. This isn't the end of the Awakening, is it?
No, not at all. I actually, I found it strangely invigorating. I think I'd gone into a space where I was almost either consciously or subconsciously trying to redefine the Awakening with each album. And in the COVID years that we all remember, not at all fondly, I released 2 rather, you would almost say, out of place Awakening albums. The one was very electronic, and the other one was kind of a very heavy on it, sort of the metal side of the Awakening, which was mostly going through the archives and cleaning out the hard drives and that kind of thing. And whilst I enjoyed creating both of those records, and there are songs on both of those records that I'm very proud of and very happy with, this feels more like a return to the Awakening as it was established in the beginning, and celebrating what made me love this kind of thing in the first place. And whilst maybe I started it off thinking it was a bookend, I was so invigorated by it all that this is kind of another chapter, if you will.
I like it. When it came to recording production on this album, is there any challenges you faced, or maybe memorable moments you can share with us?
Yeah, always. I think my biggest challenge once I get going is knowing when to stop, really. I think I've always referred to myself as a compulsive songwriter, like I have a disorder of sorts and have to go to meetings and introduce people to my lengthy catalog. And genuinely, that's probably the biggest problem, is once the vein is tapped, I just can't stop the flow. I ended up probably with, which is normal for me, I usually end up with between 30 and 40 songs for each record that comes out, and then I have to choose 10 or 12 of those. And that happened again this time, and it was really exciting again, because it felt like, when you re-explore an aspect of art, everything is new to you if you're looking at it in a fresh context, or just through the eyes of who you are today, or where you are today. And I think that's very much what happened for me now. It was just approaching it in a kind of celebratory is really the word I'd use. It's sort of not reverential, but very excited that this exists, and wanting very much to contribute to that and explore that again. So or explore it anew, I should say. This is not a rehash. It's very much a new chapter for me, but just enjoying it all.
Just want to jump back to what you said about having 30, 40 songs and having to narrow them down. Like, you can't pick your favorite child. What sort of parameters did you set up for, like, okay, this one makes it, this one isn't?
It's a very good choice. It ranges from, yes, you're right, there are certainly some favorite children that are sitting, just outside of the frame of the record. Often it just comes down to logistics. It's a case of I've written these 3 songs and they're all in the same key, in the same tempo. I'm not going to put all the 3 of them on the record. It's that kind of thing. Sometimes you make such a strong case for that song that you just move them apart on the record, make one track 2 and one track 11 or whatever. And I think anyone who's made a record or 2 can relate to that. So yeah, it's that sort of thing. It's the lyrical content, the thematic content, the style of the voice. Are there too many baritone songs, which is a real problem for me, or am I getting too histrionic too often? That kind of thing. I have to be the artist and the producer and the manager. I'm a sort of a one-person enterprise mostly. Whilst that's wonderful and very liberating, and you get to do whatever you want to do, you do run into that problem where there's just maybe too much of the same thing. So that's where some editing needs to kick in.
I like it. Interesting one for you. When you finish an album like this, how do you look back on it in your mind? Do you kind of lock it away and put it in its place, or do you constantly revisit?
I think it's a bit of both. I think you have to lock it up to some degree. Otherwise, you keep tinkering and never get anything done. So there's that. But there's the kind of the promotional lifespan of every record where we get to do things like this, like talk about the record or make music videos or book tours and all of that are very much about the work you've just done. And I think it's healthy to stay very connected with the work, especially in that time. It would be less healthy for me to suddenly start reinvestigating the most stripped down kind of alternative country song I've ever written. Right now would not be the time, right? That being said, I continue to absorb everything all the time. I mean, I think I'm always writing and I'm always inspired by everything. But I do think you need to kind of hang on to what you've just made while especially for this part of the journey.
Very true. Very true. I just thought of something else there. If Ashton from the 90s could listen to this record now, what would he say?
I think he'd be pretty excited. I think he'd be I think the production's come a long way. There's that. I think Ashton from the 90s was just figuring that kind of thing out, which again, as its pros and cons, you can get really caught up in production world and forget about songwriting. But yeah, I think this is probably the most Ashton of the 90s album I've made since I was Ashton of the 90s. So yeah, I don't think he'd be all that surprised. I think he'd be more surprised about some of the things that happened a few years ago. But yeah, I think we'd be friends.
Good answer. Good answer. Something else that intrigues me is I've interviewed many South African musicians over the years. And something I've actually noticed with all of them, they could be world-class musicians, but they seem to be stuck in South Africa. They can't get past it, get recognition. How did you actually manage to break through the barriers?
I think with anything, it's good fortune and yeah, I think that's probably the main thing. I think good fortune and sticking to what you absolutely love doing and doing to the best of your possible abilities. But it's a combination, because I'm sure many of those artists you've spoken to are doing the latter, but might not have had the good fortune to get their song. I mean, in my case, I guess I got featured. My song started getting picked up on international CD compilations. You remember CDs? Yeah, that did a lot for us, honestly. We have a song called The Dark Romantics, which was featured on a few kind of gothic compilations around the world, most notably, I guess, Cleopatra Records in the States. And that back then, those sorts of compilations were the way people would discover new bands. It was, we certainly weren't being played on mainstream radio around the world, although we did miraculously have a lot of radio support in South Africa. And again, I think that was linked to how much work was released, both as The Awakening and solo, and then a prolific amount of touring. We just toured the country literally to death. I mean, I think not literally to death. We toured it figuratively to death, and played everything from dive bars to the biggest festivals in the country. And I think that, in tandem with constantly putting new work out, and as I said, the good fortune of people supporting it and sharing it. And I think that's how we ended up on compilations in the States and in Germany and all over the world. And I guess we just kept building on that. I just kept writing more music and trying to push everything a little further along, and then finally got to tour the States for the first time in 2004. So the band had already been, The Awakening was essentially 9 years old by that point. So don't give up, I guess, is the message, because for most people, if your dream or your passion is to grow outside of your city or country of origin, 9 years is a long time to wait to see that happen. Although in fairness, the songs I mentioned on the compilations, that was probably 2 or 3 years into our released music. I think back in 99, by the third album, or by the fourth album, which had Dark Romantics on it, we started seeing kind of an international presence. And I was signed to a small US label, and then started working with small German labels, and so it continued. So yeah, don't give up if it doesn't happen in the first album or the first few years is the takeaway from that, I think.
Very good advice. Very good. Do you still keep in touch or keep an eye on the scene back home?
Well, some of my best friends still live in South Africa, and I should say live in South Africa. If I say still live in South Africa, it makes it sound like everyone's trying to get out. There are some who live in South Africa and are very happy to be there, and most of the people I know tend to be somehow related to the music world or art world. I think it's just because we make friends with people who have similar interests, I guess. And yeah, I wouldn't say I'm eye on the scene kind of thing. I don't really have an eye on any particular scene, to be brutally honest. I create and I enjoy what I do. But yeah, I'm definitely in contact with people back home.
I see. Now, as well, you're somewhat of a renaissance man. You mentioned already you've got books out. You're an actor, an author, and you've got your solo career. How do you kind of balance everything? I mean, you must not get time for much else.
Yeah. There's a brand of coffee called Mississippi Mud, which they don't pay me or anything to say this, but I think it's a bedrock of my existence. I think the level of caffeine in that enables me to do all the things. No, I mean, yes, I like coffee, but I just have a kind of I shouldn't use the word fanatical, because fanatic's really that's not a good look. But I tend to get rather obsessed with whatever it is that I'm doing. And I think, to me, art is all interwoven. I think for someone who loves words and loves lyrics and is lyric driven, it makes complete sense to want to write them down in a different format, to explore the written word and see what your work looks and feels like on a page. I think that's a natural evolution if you haven't done that already. And I've always been interested in film, and the bit of acting I've done was stage. I've never acted in film context. So when I started making my own music videos, I was able to incorporate a little bit of that, a little bit of the acting, and a little bit of my interest in film direction, and of course writing. So I'd write for some of the videos. They have little mini scripts and things, and it's been fun to explore that. And both of those things I'm currently expanding on. I'm going to release a book that is a standalone book, and it'll be a book of short stories, but it's not interwoven with the musings and the autobiographical content that the last two seem to have. And similarly, I'll be working with someone on a short film that can stand independently of the music. But of course, music, being my first love, informs all of these things. So it's present, whether I'm writing a song or a poem or a story or screenplay, so that just all interests me.
When you mentioned you get obsessed, I'd imagine you kind of get tunnel vision over a project.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that you're an easy person to work with or a hard person to work with when you get in the zone?
Yeah, good question. I think both. I think I'm an easy person to work with because I work really hard and I am very motivated and driven. So, if we're collaborating, even if it's file sharing and so on, you can bet, you'll have my part will be in your inbox the next day or in a couple of days or whatever it is. I like to kind of keep the ball rolling and keep the fires blazing and all the rest. And I think the hard part is if you're not as passionate and as driven, then maybe we'll butt heads, because we're, if we've set out to do something and either you're an awful human being, then of course I don't want to work with you. But secondly, if the work ethic just isn't there, then it's just going to be difficult for both of us, and I'd rather not do it. So I've been very fortunate, especially with my collaboration with Beauty and Chaos, because we just share the passion, we share the work ethic, and we don't step on each other's toes. Michael Ciravolo and Michael Rosen, the producer, they create these wonderful pieces of music and send it to me and to other artists. And every time we've worked together, I found the music inspiring and come up with the lyrics and vocal melodies almost immediately. Usually within kind of 48 hours, we've got a sketch of a song going, and then they'll, send it back, and then we work back and forth. If I'm not in LA, while it's happening, we just do this remotely because, you can, with the wild times of the internet. Yeah, I think that collaboration's wonderful. And I was there in the beginning. The first song we wrote together became the first single and the first video and the first glimpse, the world god of Beauty and Chaos. And we've just put out, I think it's the fifth song we've done together now, which is called Made of Rain, and that came out just a few days ago. So, the point is, there are definitely many collaborations that I've experienced that are absolutely wonderful, and you feel like you're growing in that relationship. And that's what any relationship kind of, that's the idea or ideal in any relationship, I think, is mutual growth. So, yeah, I think I might have completely gotten off the topic, but I think it's more or less what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, along the same lines. I'm actually very glad you mentioned Beauty and Chaos. The next question was actually about them. I had Michael on a couple of months ago. Great guy. But yes. I was wanting to ask, how did it actually come about? How did you guys meet and start collaborating?
The first collaborative work I did in this vein was with Mark Gemini Thwaite, who used to play for The Mission and for Peter Murphy. And he put together a record where he wrote all the music and was kind of getting guest vocalists to do things. And we were introduced, and a similar thing happened. He sent me a few pieces of music, and they resonated. And we had, 3 songs, I think, or two or three songs ended up on his kind of debut release. And he's a Schecter artist, and Michael Ciravolo is the president of Schecter Guitars. So Michael heard the work I did with Mark and invited me to do something along similar lines for his project that he was starting off at the time, called Beauty and Chaos. So that's how we met, and that's how it got going. And like with any of these things, there are many introductions, and especially in a place like Los Angeles, you can't go out for coffee without meeting someone who might know someone, and that's kind of how it goes. But not everybody's on the same page, and not everybody has the same energy and the same passion. So I think the fact that we're, what is it now, 6 years down the road with our collaboration, Beauty and Chaos, is testament to, Michael's character and ability to write wonderful songs, but also our shared work ethic and personalities. We're good friends, and we get on well, and we make good things together, I think.
Well, hopefully it continues.
I'm sure it will.
And looking to the future, on September 28th, you're embarking on a UK EU tour. It's a solo acoustic tour. What more can you tell us?
Well, it's my first international tour since the pandemic. The last tour I did was with Wayne Hussey of The Mission, and we did 36 dates across Europe, which was also a solo acoustic. I'd do my set, and Wayne very graciously gave me a good, I think I had a 45-minute set, which was certainly beyond a typical opening act, so to speak. So that was great. And of course, everything was set for me to go back in 2020 to do a solo, kind of a headline solo tour with many of the promoters and venues that I'd met on that tour and from previous work. But of course, we all know what happened in 2020, so that got shelved. And we tried to reschedule it a few times, and it just fizzled out. So here we are, 5 years later now, and it just finally felt like the right time to play this sort of show in those sorts of venues in those countries again. And no lack of trying. We tried to pull this off last year, and I got really sick and couldn't do it. And now I'm recovering from COVID for the fourth time, but thankfully I hope the antibodies will keep me going, so I make it through the next few tours. But it seemed fitting that I kind of pick up where I left off, and I wanted to do a kind of career-spanning solo tour where I get to sing whatever it is I want to sing from whichever album I want to sing from. And I'm very fortunate to have a small but devoted fan base. They seemed to enjoy it the last time, so hopefully they'll enjoy it this time. And I love the solo acoustic environment. As a storyteller, it's wonderful to really connect with people in smaller venues and, again, celebrate the experience we've all had around this work. And you get to meet people afterwards. And it's very rewarding kind of show to do. I enjoy the big rock shows too, but it's a very different environment and different experience. And I think having just completed the 2 books, which were both intended to be celebrated on the road and book tours and whatever, and none of that happened thanks to the pandemic. This way I get to do a little bit of both. I'll probably do a little bit of reading. Don't be scared. People don't like reading. It'll be sort of 2 minutes, just I promise. And mostly singing, a little bit of talking, a little bit of storytelling. And it's just a great format to do that. I've done a few of these locally sort of here in the States, but this is the first opportunity to take it on the road, so to speak.
Exciting times ahead. Nice segue as well. The podcast is called Concerts That Made Us, so I have to ask you some concert-related questions if you don't mind.
Love it.
First off, as a concert goer, what concerts would you say have made you?
Well, I grew up in South Africa, and I grew up in the evil apartheid era. So we had very, very few concerts, very few international bands, I should say, would come to South Africa in those days for good reason. And once bands started visiting, I was really fortunate. I think one of the first shows I ever saw was the Rolling Stones. And the first big show I ever saw was the Rolling Stones in 94, I think it was, or somewhere around there. It was the Voodoo Lounge era. And if you like rock and roll, you like the Rolling Stones. If you like music, you probably like something that comes from the Rolling Stones, along with Elvis and the Beatles and many others. And that was a massive experience to see something at that scale and something you've been listening to since you can remember hearing music. It was pretty surreal. So that definitely left a mark on me. And I think the earliest shows I can remember from that sort of period of time would have been obviously that one that Depeche Mode did, Songs of Faith and Devotion tour. That was wonderful to see. And at the time, I was a massive Garbage fan, so getting to see Garbage up close was very exciting for me. And in more recent years, if I had to just pick sort of favorite concerts, I would probably go with Nick Cave in Kansas City, Missouri, which is about 2 hours from where I live, 3 hours, and well worth the drive. And he was doing the Push the Sky Away album, which to me is a great kind of return to form for him after some less exciting albums that he did before that. And he looked great. He sounded great. The band sounded great. It was just, he was re-energized, I think, after doing Grinder Man and all of that. And it was just wonderful and definitely stands out for me.
I like it. Here's a bit of a fun one now. Is there a show you attended that fans of your music would be surprised you went to?
Yes. My son and my youngest son and friends of ours are big Jacob Collier fans. So being a good dad, we went to watch Jacob Collier. I don't think most of my fans probably know who that is. He's very, very talented young guy and super talented. I mean, like genius level musician, arranger, singer, but admittedly not something I would have personally rushed out to go and watch. Having said that, it was a very, very good show and I'd recommend seeing him. And I guess that's the surprising one that leaps to mind. And that was just, I don't know, within the last year that I saw that.
Not too bad. Not too bad. No Taylor Swift or Nicki Minaj or anything like that then.
No, but I was sad about missing Olivia Rodrigo. And so yeah, I've no, I think Taylor Swift is absolutely wonderful singer-songwriter, especially for the market that she's primed herself for. And we have friends who have daughters who are obsessed with her, and it's just wonderful to see someone making this kind of positive music. I think in an age of a very different message that's being sent out by many other people that operate in the pop world. I think say what you want, but I think Taylor Swift is fighting a good fight.
I agree. I agree. Now, you've played all over, as you mentioned. You've played the crowds of upwards of 30,000 people. Is there a gig or a concert you've played that you would consider your favorite? You know, it just couldn't have got any better.
It's probably that concert to the 30,000. That was the first time. Well, that was when we headlined a festival in South Africa called Opi Kopi. Opi Kopi is what I was trying to say, which means on the hill. And The Awakening had just put out our third record, which is called Ethereal Menace. And we're doing it as a 5-piece band. And we're all, I don't know, just really amped up to be on a stage of that size in front of that number of people. And there was a moment, we had a hit with a song called Marie on the second Awakening album, which is just a simple little love song, and those ones seem to do quite well for some reason. I will never forget hearing, I don't know how many thousand people singing along with the chorus on that, and that's one of those moments that I thought, well, that's probably as good as it gets. I mean, especially for a South African, it would be like, I guess, our version of playing Wembley or something. You know, it's just, to be in front of maybe not as many people, but certainly a comparable experience. And you keep thinking, well, I hope they don't realize they booked the wrong guy. It's actually me. But yeah, I know it's a wonderful experience, and it's true that you feed off the energy of the crowd. I mean, it's just the more people, the less difficult it is for me. It just becomes easier and easier because you lifted up all these people, and to hear people singing along your own, words you wrote in your bedroom when you were a kid and all that. That's really wonderful.
I could imagine. To switch that question around, maybe the early days, is there a gig you would consider the worst? Things went wrong, and how did you overcome it?
Let me think about that for a minute. Well, there's one that turned out positively. So we'll start with that. No, maybe finish with that one. Let's think. The gig that turned out badly. Look, I think it was a gig that was so bad it didn't happen. I mean, there's that kind of show, like when you get to the venue and there's been some kind of miscommunication and they thought you were coming the next week or whatever it was. That's probably as disappointing as it gets because there's no turning that around. You think about maybe setting up an acoustic show outside or something, but the police don't always like that. And then a similar thing happened where we got to a venue, and this is probably late 90s, late 90s, maybe 2000. And doesn't matter how popular you are in one city, there's always going to be at least one city where nobody cares, especially not the promoter or the venue. And there was no stage, there was no sound system, there was nothing, but there was a very enthusiastic promoter in this particular one. And we went and physically carried a PA system down some dodgy block of flats across, with the whole thing. It was very, very DIY. And this is the same band who had headlined that festival I just mentioned, a year ago. So it's you never know what's going to happen. And saw a fight happen outside, as we're like sort of dodging the fight to get into the venue and load up. And we used tables and chairs to make a stage and the whole thing. And the police were at that one too, but they came twice to try and shut it down because we're all making such a noise and everyone's having such a good time. So that was one of those. It went down in legend and lore in the South African music underground that, the cops showed up twice. That's amazing. And no one was actually hurt at the show. It was one of those where the temptation to just walk away was pretty strong when you arrive and there's absolutely nothing there. But it worked out. And I think that was in Port Elizabeth, which is where I was born. So maybe I felt extra strongly about making that one work. So
Well, I'm glad it worked out. And when it comes to showtime, your pre-show and post-show, how do you psych yourself up? And then afterwards, how do you like to wind down?
I think being the promise of the show is exciting enough. I think that I certainly don't need to psych myself up, so to speak. I think if anyone's there to see me or the band or whatever it is I'm doing, that's reason enough to be excited, especially as the years go on. And I'm continually encouraged that people still support what I do or still support music and live music. It's wonderful that we get to still do this. Coming down's a different story, and I think just having no illusions about going to bed anytime soon is probably healthy. You know, you're so wired from the whole experience, and a glass of wine or three that does help. Red, dark Cabernet, strong as you got. It's usually my thing. But I'm not advocating heavy drinking. I'm just saying that for me, I think being away from everybody after we've done all the signing the records and all of that, and meeting people, which is wonderful, but it does keep you kind of amped up, you know. So going somewhere where you can just be entirely on your own and have a glass of wine, I think that's kind of my routine.
Sounds perfect. Sounds perfect. Before we dive into the last couple of questions, then, we've heard about the tour, we've heard about the album. Any more future plans you can share with us?
Well, I think I briefly mentioned that there will be a standalone book coming. I am working on that, where I essentially take some of the short stories I've already published, and I've added to some of those. I've written new ones, you know, and so on. So that's kind of something that's happening in parallel, you know, while everything else is going on. It's a great it's great to have different avenues to explore and not just be about, you know, creating songs and singing them. So there's that. I've also been involved with scoring some movies and having my work used in film and television, and that's something I'm sort of actively pursuing as well. I just had it featured in one of my songs featured in a horror movie. Surprise, surprise! The music I make, called Pale Horse, which has just come out. So that's there'll be more work with the people who made that movie and other movies, you know, the other directors and artistic humans that thankfully exist. And I love that. I've always been very aesthetically driven with the music. I in terms of imagery, you know, is very present in my mind when I'm creating something, creating the space. And it's lovely to dress that all up and experience it through your imagination. But it's also wonderful to set your music to someone else's imagination, where they come with the imagery, and you create the sound or the song. Again, it's just I've released so many records. It's at this stage, I think it interests me to collaborate in different ways. Another thing we shouldn't have asked me, what more's coming up? So many things. You know, many of the songs I wrote for this record will be released either in EP form or perhaps an outtakes record or something, because I'm just really loving what I'm making at the moment. And if people seem to like it too, then I guess, you know, I'll share more of it. So there's that. Learning to speak in a higher register. I should try that too. I've not done. Yeah. Oh yes, Beauty and Chaos, the song we just released. We're working on an alternate version of that. He likes to do these beauty re-envisioned projects, and maybe I'm letting the cat out the bag, but you asked, and you know Michael as well. So we're busy with a reworking of Made of Rain, which I absolutely love and very excited. It's a complete remake, not just a remix or something. So that'll come out whenever it comes out, and I'm excited to hear that. And yes, the short film, yeah, working with a director friend of mine, and no idea when we'll finish that, but it's just something very enjoyable to be working on at the same time. I think that's and another possible acoustic-driven solo record, or it may evolve into a project of its own, depending on who I collaborate with on that. And that's kind of following on from the Waiting for a Voice album, but going kind of a lot darker and more cinematic with it all. So there's a dark theme that keeps popping up here. I don't know if you've picked up on that.
Just a bit.
Just a tad, yeah. So, I mean, who wears eyeliner in the morning like me? I mean, come on. This is from yesterday. I was making, and then another music video. We just released, The Awakening just released Mirror Midnight as our first single and video from the album. There's a second video for a song called Your Vampire, and that'll be out, I think, while I'm on tour. This first part of the tour, that video will be released while I'm in the UK. And that, of course, is the most important thing that's on the way, is the tour that's coming up. And if you're listening to this or watching this, please come and watch one of the shows, or maybe all of the shows. I'll be in, shall I tell everyone where I'm going to be? Sure.
Yeah, you might as well.
Well, I might as well, yeah. I'm here. Let me try and see the flyer here without my glasses on. Okay, on 28th of September, I'm at Campus Noir Festival in Ilmenau, Germany. 29th September, the Water Rats in London. 2nd of October, the Fulford Arms in York. 3rd of October, Cabaret Voltaire in Edinburgh. 4th of October, Record Junkie in Sheffield. 25th of October at Kohi in Karlsruhe, Germany. 26th of October, Paulus Kircher in Dortmund, Germany. I hope I said that right. 27th of October, Café Folier in Reti, Belgium. 1st of November, Maria's Ballroom in Hamburg, Germany. And then ending on the 2nd of November at the Brainstorm Festival in Apeldoorn in the Netherlands. And I apologize for my bad pronunciation. It's still kind of morning here, so I'm still waking up. And yeah, doing the best I can.
I'm sure you did just fine. I want to ask, it might be a while off, but is there any plans for an electric tour?
Yes, there definitely. And it is a while off. It'll probably be more like next year this time. And again, it really depends on how things go with this record. And by that, I don't mean, a million sales. It's just to see if people are hungry for it, and whether promoters are hungry for it, because without the promoters, it's kind of tricky to do this, especially with an electric tour, because it tends to be a 4 or 5 piece band and all the other people that you need to make it happen. So we really need to see that we've got some good promoters on board to do that. But we are starting to speak with people, and if we can get enough shows lined up it'll probably be the same areas. It'll be the UK and Germany for sure, possibly Portugal. Just have to take it from there. See if we can get some of that booked. Then we'll keep growing and developing the tour.
I like it. Fingers crossed. Right, yeah. We'll dive into the last couple. There are a couple of fun random ones.
Okay.
First off, besides work and everything else, what are you obsessed with?
My cat Willow, my baby cat, who's, maybe you can see her. Is she? Let's see if we can do this. There she is.
Yeah.
The most beautiful cat in the world. And no, really, she is. And she was feral. We found her in the garden, or she found us in the back garden. We live on an acre that's in a subdivision with many other acres. So we have deer and raccoon and foxes and all sorts of things running around outside. And while some of those are wonderful to see, some of them would eat little cats like the foxes or the owls and the hawks when she was absolutely tiny. So, I could spend an hour on the whole Willow story, but let's just say we have a connection because we had to quarantine her in my studio because we have other cats who I love dearly, but slightly less than I love Willow. And only slightly. And I think there's just a bond when you've got a little cat who is on death's door. I mean, she was just, fleas and worms and all the stuff from being outside. And so she must think of me as some kind of savior. I mean, my wife played a big part in it, but she got to see me every day as I was lying there, or she was lying there, I should say. I wasn't lying down. I was sitting. She was lying on my lap, and Daddy would get up and, clean up all the stuff that had to be cleaned up from the night before while she was getting everything out of her system. And yeah, it was many months of just being in studio quarantine. So I think we have a very strong bond. Well, that, and she's just the most amazing cat. And even if none of that had happened, we'd still have a strong bond, and she'd still be the most beautiful cat in the world. Let's just be clear.
You're going to bring her on tour with you?
I wish I could. It's honestly, it's so bad. My wife and I book our vacations around how long can we really be away from Willow. It's sort of 2 nights, maybe 3 nights. Got to get back, to see what she's doing. In the beginning, it was terrible. I had a baby cam, like a cat cam, set up so I could see her no matter where I was. So when she was, we'd have someone look after her, obviously, when we weren't here, but I wouldn't trust another human, so I'd have to check on her with the baby cam. So that's one significant obsession in my life. I do like film. I do force myself to stop making songs and watch films from time to time. I like some of my favorite directors would be Ingmar Bergman, a huge fan of his work, as you can probably tell from all the black and white music videos I make. And of course, David Lynch and Jim Jarmusch. Those are probably my top 3. So that I do.
I like it.
Yeah, occasionally we leave the house and, have dinner or drinks with friends. We do that. It's a kind of a normal human thing to do from time to time. So at least once a month,
Has to be done too. Has to be done. The next question, it's a bit of an odd one. If you had to spend 24 hours locked in a room with any musician from history, who would it be?
David Bowie, obviously. Yeah.
I was expecting it.
Oh yeah. So much love for David. Oh yes. I had a terrible earworm song in my head just before we started chatting this morning. So I rushed into the living room put on the Heroes album, and that got me kind of right, settled my soul, for the day. And that's what most of David Bowie's music settles my soul on any given moment. So
Completely understand. And the final question, so what's your go-to album? Or have you just mentioned it?
It's always, it will be a Bowie album. It's often been between Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, because my favorite song of all time is Rock and Roll Suicide. But I would probably go to Scary Monsters. That's probably my go-to Bowie record. And some may shudder at that very thought, but it's just phenomenal record, and edgy and exciting and bizarre solos bizarre guitar solos and interesting everything. It's just, I love the character work, the energy of the record. That's probably my go-to record.
Perfect choice. Listen, Ashton, I can't describe how enjoyable this was now. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much, and hope to visit Ireland at some point. I've never played there. Love to do that. I think I'm 18% Irish, so it's about time I did that right.
In quiet desperation, I pulled the words aside to cover up the violence that blurred my aching mind. And gazing through the portholes, deafened by the noise, I spoke into the ocean. I'm waiting for a voice. The moon began the passage, the waves crept to the shore. The children left their shelters and gave up less for more. And in a darker forest, no longer spoiled for choice, I told a tearful willow, I'm waiting for a voice. forgotten now. All those sirens on the rocks, gone, but not forgotten now. Hand in hand with the lost. The mountain stood before me and echoed all I'd done. The dreams I had abandoned, the sadness I had spun. And in the house of sorrow, the stricken may rejoice, but still I chase horizons, waiting for a voice. Oh, but still I chase horizons, waiting for a voice.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. And if you're interested in signing up to Band Builder Academy, use the link in the show notes below and enter the code CONCERTS and you'll receive 10% off. So, until next time, keep rocking. Hey, what are you guys still doing here? The show's over. It's over. You can go home. Go on. We'll see you next time. We'll be here. Bye.